Hi, and welcome to the Survivor series of the Fig Tree podcast. I had an amazing conversation today with a friend of mine, Angela Manning, who is a supreme example of someone who not only has survived trauma in her life, but she is thriving and is a light of giving and love to everybody with whom she comes in contact. After having experienced years of abuse, Angie was married and soon became aware she and her husband were going to be unable to have children. They exhausted every effort in their quest to conceive, only to be met time and again with disappointment. In the process of those years, she and her husband Jim moved to Louisiana from St. Louis, Missouri, where she began receiving counseling and help in order to begin the healing process from the abuse which she had suffered in the past. As she and her husband were navigating these issues, tragedy struck unexpectedly when her mom and only sibling, her sister, were in a head on collision and killed instantly. It seemed her life was trauma after trauma, and quite frankly, there were times I didn't know how she was even putting one foot in front of the other. In 2008, she and Jim assumed the pastorate of the Life Church in Manning, Louisiana, and their story has continued to unfold. I'm not going to give away a lot of the details of what has happened since then. You're about to hear those, but I loved our conversation, and I know you will too. When you finish listening to Angie, you will know exactly why she is not just a survivor, she is a thriver. Well, hey, Angie, welcome to the podcast. It's good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, miss you, miss you. You're a longtime friend, and we don't get to see each other enough. So glad to have you on today. And you have an incredible story of strength and resilience and God's grace and God's sustaining power. And you are you are part of our Survivor series that we're doing here. So I just thank you for being willing to talk about everything and to share everything. So let's just go ahead and dive in. Obviously, you have a story, and so we all have stories, but all of our stories are not as filled with trauma. Sometimes I don't think, and yours is definitely one that has had its share. But you are such a prime example of strength. So let's just start, and wherever you want to start, and however you want to start, and just give us a part of how you came to be where you are.
Okay. You are part of how I got to be where I am. And I don't just say that, but when we went to Alexandria back in 2001, and then we went home for about a year and came back in 2000 and the end of 2002. When we got back there, I think I was worse than the first time that I came, just going back thinking I had been freed, but then having to go back and face what freedom looked like fighting for. So when we got back, you and Pastor Terry, of course, I don't know how many times you had us for dinner. The Christmas that I still have so many things. I won't name them all right here, but so many things around my house that you had given to us, at Christmas and just different things. And still with your little note that was attached to it. So that's not just saying it literally. I mean, I think you both know that, but you and Pastor are definitely two of the reasons of how we made it. We got to Alexandria. So, and you guys kept us. I mean, then I didn't even know what to do, what to give, how I just didn't know. So we got to Alexandria by major turmoil and trauma. So after we were there for probably 4 or 5 years, I lost my mom and my sister in a car wreck one day. And it's kind of a whirlwind of what all happened right then. But I do know that it was on a Wednesday, March the 6th of 2006. March the 8th is what it was, March the 8th. And I know on Thursday you guys were there.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think that I really realized the depth of doing a double funeral at the time. It was just kind of just probably more than I don't even know that I have a right vocabulary. Even though you've asked me this question, I just don't think I have a right vocabulary to say probably how I felt then. I have often looked back and said that I know God gave me little gifts, if that would make sense, such as part of my story on that is we were with my mom and sister that night before because we were actually there. Jim was doing a memorial service. And so I was able to be with my mom and sister. And they left that morning, and she was supposed to be there for Easter, like 5 or 6 weeks later. And so um, when we found out that they had both been killed in that car wreck, we had just got done eating lunch with my best friend Joanne, her and Chris.
Mhm.
And so when I'm talking about gifts, these are the things that I think have been one of the things that have helped carry me through, is because it did happen. It was a shock. It was tragic. Um, don't have a mother at the age of 35. I needed my mom still. But the gifts that I'm talking about is prior to their death, the Lord let me have that 24, 36 hours that I had. If they
Mhm.
would have gotten killed in a car wreck while I was in Alexandria, it would have been months that I had seen them. And I've often thought, I don't know how that would have felt to have to deal with. I'm sure I would have had to deal with it, but I'm glad the Lord didn't do that. The Lord gave me, because I know that God sees everything and he orders our steps. And I know that he gave me those moments. So I did have my mom and my sister for the last 24, 36 hours, maybe 48 hours, maybe four, because it was 2 nights of their life. I did have that. So I was grateful for that. When we found out, we had just left Chris and Joanne. So I was 5 minutes from being with them. And so we went back, and then they just kind of took us through, everything while we were trying to figure out all the chaos of that first day. And so I had that. Um, the gifts of having you and Pastor Terry, and then Pastor and Anthony and Sister Meg, the amount of friends, just the gifts that at the moment, I don't know really what I was thinking, but I just know that God was there. So those are what I call the gifts in the midst of
Right.
those have been a comfort to me, I guess. The reason why they've
Mhm.
been a comfort is because I've been able to know that they were really just things that God let me have, those
Mhm.
moments and the friendships and the people. It was a comfort that my mother and my sister were able to have such a honorable
Mhm.
memorial to funeral. They were able to have that. And
Mhm.
I don't know what I actually ever thought, but just knowing there was not really a church at the time. And so those are the gifts. So, how have I made it through? I think was one of the questions I was asked, like
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
story. I think everybody faces it different. I do think that earlier, maybe you had mentioned whenever we were talking about there was already other trauma I was dealing with before
Mhm.
that. So, I think it kind of was all piled up on each other. But I know there's a lot of people that have God has put in my life, but I think that it sounds cliche, but it's really not. I have thought about this question since you gave it to me. How did I make it, or what would I have said been was one of the major keys or components that brought me through? And it was God being the people of God being his hands and feet. Um,
Mhm.
I needed it. So having POA, having
Mhm.
pastors, having people that were there, of course, counseling, having the friendships. I they were the hands and feet of Jesus for me at that time, and I think I've just been able to look back over that all this time to know that even in the midst of grief and sorrow, in the midst of all the trauma, God was there. And it is hard to explain if you've never experienced the sweet presence of God. And so
Mhm.
I would welcome anybody to contact you for more of how to find the presence of God if they've never been in that, because man is great, counseling's great, my pastors are great, but the presence of God, that is the only way that I can think of how he carried me through his word, comforting me, and through the people that he put in my life, that no one could fix it. I think one of the questions was, did anyone ever say anything that just helped me through? As I look back, I don't remember certain things ever being said. I just remember people were the hands and feet of God helping me during that time.
That is so true. I interviewed Gil Larson about her story, which anybody that wants to listen to that, it's available here as well. Um, and she talked about the fact it wasn't anything anybody said to her in her time of shock and sorrow and just not even knowing which end was up. She said it was just the fact that people were there. And so you're echoing that here right now. That is so true. I wish we could all understand that we are not heroes in those situations. We are just the hands and feet of Jesus. And it's not what comes out of our mouth, it's mainly just what comes through our hugs
Right.
and our presence.
Yep.
Just sitting on a couch, just sitting in a chair, just showing up and sitting on a front porch or whatever is massive in those times. Um, you also, though, Angie, you were one that turned toward that comfort and toward that strength. You did not turn away from that. And I know that many times people are so hurt and so distraught that they try to put a wall shell about themselves to protect themselves. And I understand that. I do understand that. I'm probably one that would tend to do that more. My personality lends itself to that. But I watch the people who not just survive, but thrive after tragedy and after trauma. And usually the ones who seem to really survive and then thrive are the ones who embrace the people and turn toward that and turn toward the presence of God rather than trying to put the shell around them. So if you're one like me, if you're out there listening and you're one like me and you tend to want to put the shell around you, I just encourage you to listen to what Angie's saying, because she was one that turned toward the light and toward the strength. So in the days, and the weeks following that, there was a whole lot of details. I do remember that time so well. Um, I don't remember whether we got on a plane that night or that next morning. I think it was that. I think we got the last flight out that night to fly to St. Louis to be with you guys. Um, and I don't really remember a lot either, because we were all feeling it with you. We were all feeling that terrible, terrible tragedy. Your mom and sister had both started visiting us in Alexandria, and they had come through a lot. And so they were not churchgoers at the time, but they had begun opening their hearts toward that again. And that was such a comfort as well, knowing all of the communication that had gone on. So after all of the details were settled and after you guys came back home, um, what were some things you did in order to just make it through the next? Let's talk about the first year. Do you remember? How did you cope? It was just you and Jim at the time. You did not have Chase. So how did you cope?
I've tried to think about that. Um, sometimes you see differently when you look back. I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering how I really acted in the middle of it. I think uh, sometimes I catch myself wondering if, when I look back at situations, if I've really handled some things as well as I reminisce that, oh, it was great, because I don't really know sometimes. But
Yeah.
I do know that when I came back, I have this incredible memory, which could be a blessing or a curse. So, like, I remember all the days. I remember my first Sunday
Mm-hmm.
back. Yeah, I remember the date. I remember what I wore. I remember Pastor Anthony had prayer, and I remember just crying and feeling like I couldn't talk to anyone. I remember Mother's Day coming shortly after that. Uh, and it was not just Mother's Day, it was baby dedication also at POA
Oh,
that.
wow. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, for the first time, I didn't have a mother, and I'd already been trying for so long to be a mother. So it was probably a pity party that I had then. I remember I didn't go to church, and I did check in telling somebody I wasn't coming, but I remember I didn't go. I just didn't feel I could make it. Uh, I, I just remember that we went back, and people were so kind. People were loving. People didn't know what to say. I probably sat in the house a lot there on Kent Street. I remember trying to watch the video over and over of the funeral. I remember things that I wish I would not have done or let been done. It was just such a crazy moment that there was like I didn't notice several things, the obituary being wrong, and just a lot of things. So that started playing on my mind. So then I started just focusing on that, I think, too much. And I don't really, again, I know I had counseling again, Dr. Brian. I went to him for some grief counseling. Um, People were just good. People were just good to me. I remember I just did not have a lot to give. Um,
Mhm.
and that's a terrible feeling to me, to feel like a moocher. You're like a leech. And I'd already had felt like a leech, because that's the one thing, I guess, if you were going to ask, what was it like? I would think that was the most helpless thing that I had felt, because we came to Alec in trauma. So we came, I didn't have anything to give. We do a little better. We go back home to St. Louis. Hell breaks out. Come back. Worse than I felt like I was the first time, and with nothing. So just feeling like a leech for so long, that's depressing to me. And then when I came back after losing my mom and sister, I kind of felt like a pity case. Like people just had
Mhm.
pity. And I understand nobody meant to make me feel like pity. I understand it's compassion. But when you're in your own head sometimes and you sit there thinking of what all you don't have, turns to pity. Like, I came here in a mess, and now I got this loss, and I don't have a child. And it just, I remembered that probably very well, because I remember not liking that feeling, thinking I have to get out of this feeling, but not knowing how. So um, I would say maybe, I don't know a time frame, but I just remember feeling like that. To find comfort, I probably did watch the video a lot. I wanted to see my mom's face.
Mhm.
I would try to call her phone, like her work phone, until they changed
Mhm.
the recording, just to hear it. I would go home for everything, like my mom's. Well, she passed right after her birthday, so Mother's Day. The first Mother's Day, no, the first Mother's Day we did go home. I was there. It was the second Mother's Day at POA. That's what it was. But the first Mother's Day we
Mhm.
went home, went with Grandma. Went home for Kelly's birthday. I just went home a lot to go to the graveside.
Mhm.
So I did that. Um, it's kind of I wish that I could give a better answer how I made it. I, it's kind of like when you hear about the footprints in the sand. I mean, I think there was a
Mhm.
lot of times that I was walking, but not really living, not really knowing how I was making it through. But somehow the presence of God, when I didn't even know, somehow people, I mean, people were just so good to me. So I had to break out of the feeling that I was a I was a pity case. I think that would probably be the worst thing. And I know that might sound like crazy to think. I mean, I was mourning, yes, but I felt like I'm mourning on top of another trauma. So I just felt pity. I felt pitied. And so people didn't do anything. They were kind, thank God. But I think God helped me with that after a while, but I wasn't in the place to do anything. And I think that was a helpless feeling to me, to not, because my personality does need people. I talk, I like to give, serve. I just
You are a
didn't think I
giver.
could do any of it.
You're definitely a giver. And yeah, I can see where the fact that you didn't even have any strength to give
Mm.
would be, because that's where you get a lot of your fulfillment from. So not having the emotional or the mental or strength to give anything would take away a part of where you get your fulfillment from. My memories of you, so from the outside looking in, but pretty close,
You're close, yes.
to where you were, but from the outside looking in, I marveled at your strength to just get up in the morning and keep going. Um, so where you were feeling probably not fulfilled because you couldn't give, I was marveling at the mere fact you could walk. You could just walk, which I'm sure that's part of what you felt coming from people as pity. Um, a lot of it, though, from my perspective, I was admiring you. I was admiring you. I was trying to put myself in your shoes, and I was thinking, I don't know if I could be this strong. I don't know if I could be this kind through this. um, you didn't exhibit the anger toward the outside world that you see a lot of people exhibit when they go through trauma and tragedy. And so I know that internal memories are always different than other people's external memories, but just to let you know, you did not exhibit that outwardly.
God.
so so you made it through that. You made it through that, and then another chapter opened in your lives, and you guys moved to Manning, Louisiana, to pastor a church in Manning. And you and Jim had wanted a child for years. So by the time this occurred, how many years had you been married?
We were married for 19 years and
Okay.
we've been trying for 16. So
Yeah.
uh, when it all happened. So mhm.
So talk to us about that. Talk to us about how all of that transpired. It transpired for people who have no clue of what the situation was with Chase.
Well, so I had found out I was not going to be able to have any children. And so we thought we would start trying the process of adopting, which really scared me. And I didn't want older than 3. I went to one of those marriage conferences way back, probably
Yeah.
remember, but one of the men said, if you don't hold a baby early on, there's no bond. And that freaked me out. So I really didn't even want to get a 3-year-old, but I was like, okay. So on our form, it said 3, but so we'd been trying. And I don't know, things just didn't seem like they were working out. I think Pastor Terry was making some calls, and I think Pastor Anthony and
Mm-hmm.
different friends, but nothing was really working out. So Tupelo Children's Mansion comes to Manny on their summer tour. I was sick at home with bronchitis. And so Jim came home that night and said, I found our son. And I was like, what? He said, I did. And Jim, I know like sometimes if Jim's just playing around or if he's just, just talking, just to be talking to be funny, but he knew like there
Mm-hmm.
was something about the way Jim said that I don't know. I guess it just stopped me in my tracks. Like this is something. So he told me he was about 8 years old, had black hair. And when I saw the picture of him, he had brown hair and he was 11. But regardless, they're just details, right? But anyway, I remember how that came about. I hadn't seen him. And so, with a bunch of calls and different things, it worked out to where he could come. And so, Chase was a different name at the time. And so, he came and he stayed for 2 weeks. And we were leaving Tupelo. So from Tupelo back to Manny's probably 8 hours. But we were in Roebeline, about 15 minutes from home. And Chase, who was very, very smart and talked with a very good vocabulary at 11, he puts his head back and he said, I'm in a conundrum. And I said, what? And he said, I have 3 families that want to adopt me and I don't know who to choose. And when he said that, I got so like inside of me kind of got a little sick and nervous. Like, I don't want to do these emotional roller coasters. And so we get home, we show him around. It's about midnight. We show him around, take him to his room, pray with him. And we just tell him, look, the Lord will give you wisdom. You just pray and ask the Lord to help you to choose. So one of the families was going to adopt him and another sibling. And then I think one of the other families had already adopted one of his siblings. So he had the opportunity. We were only just adopting him. So I kind of got nervous that I'm about to put my heart out here. But I prayed, I went to bed, and the next morning I woke up with such peace and just laid it out. We didn't bribe him or anything. Like I made him make his bed, showed him how to do it. I just treated him like if he was mine already. And within a week, he said he wanted us to adopt him. So we, finished that out, took him back to Tupelo because we had to take him back for a few weeks. Anyway, he he came. We adopted him. It was like 6 weeks from the day that I met him,
Mm.
but I knew he was mine from the first day I saw him. We went to Tupelo, and when I saw him, he's sweaty, running outside, and he came up, and I reached down to hug him, and I guess the tears came, and my contacts fell out, and I didn't realize. And then I was like, "Where's my contacts?" I couldn't see. And so, but I knew, so I knew he was ours. I just knew it. So it worked out. We got him in August of 2010. He was 11. It was such a God thing. Had perfect peace, and he's 23. He's getting married in December to a very good girl. He's been he's been a he's just been a wonderful child. Like
Mhm.
he's been a child like everybody else, but to adopt an 11-year-old, I've heard horror
Mhm.
stories, but it was
Right.
only God. And the only thing is he thinks he knows more than I do, just like I did with my parents. So that's it. The normal things. It's just been normal stuff with him. It's not been any troubled background or anything like that. So that has been a God thing. With my mom, it was in times though like that of knowing I'm getting the thing I've wanted my whole life, or my 16 years of married life. But even as a kid, you want to be a mother, and so I'm finally getting this child, and I didn't have my mom to share it with. So the bitterness of the bittersweet, I remember those moments. Every high thing, coming to Manny, buying a house, getting Chase. Chase is getting married. I've thought about it more and more. Just every high thing. She's the one person that would be, there's no one on the earth that would be any happier than my
Right.
mother, for this.
Right.
So not
Wow.
having that causes that sadness, but um Chase was, he was an answer to prayer, and he's been a delight, and it was just God. There's
Yeah.
no other word to say about that. It was just God.
Yeah. We all felt that. We all felt that.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine you and Jim without him. I mean, it's just like, I don't even hardly remember what you were like without him. He's just,
I don't either. It's just so, and I remember getting him that first day, and he said, "Mom, which you had to probably wait, I don't know, maybe 10 months to a year before you heard mama. I don't know, but I heard it that day. He kept saying, Mom, Mom, Mom." And I remember, and I wrote it in my phone, what that was like to hear that. But the one thing that I will say about this to whoever is listening, I have taught this in my Sunday school, but the day that I became a mom, it literally changed everything in my hunger for more of God and my determination that no matter what, I was making it. When I realized the awesome responsibility to try to raise a child, um, it just changed. So Chase, and he knows this. He knows I say this. I've told him in good conversations, and I've told him in heated corrective conversations, but he's my motivation. He's the visual that I have when hurt comes. He's the visual I have when I've been discouraged. He's the visual I have in every area of my life. I have the vision of Chase right there and what he will do. And it makes me want to live with all I have. I read a statistic a while back. It's been since I've had Chase. And I can't remember the reference, but the statistic was to the point that each generation is going to do less than the previous.
mhm.
It was talking about serving God, and it was kind of a study about Joshua and how all the people were going to serve God, but we turn a couple pages, if that, no one knows God. And so when I read that and I was studying on that, it made me then even all the more realize I have to live above I think I have to live harder than I want. I have
Mhm.
to run with more endurance than I ever thought, because if he gives any less, my grandkids, my great grandkids, at what generation would it be less? So
Right.
on that, with getting Chase, it
Wow.
was the greatest day, but it was also the day two things happened in my mind that day. The first thing that happened was, as much as I've missed my mother, it was a comfort because my mother had always told me how much she loved me. And she
Mhm.
always said she loved me more than I would ever be able to love her back. She always let me know I was everything to her. So I thought that I had loved my mom, and I didn't realize that she could love me more. But when I got Chase, that instant love, I knew that my mom did love me far more than I loved her, because my love for Chase
Mhm.
now was completely different. So that was the first thing that I really did understand my mom's love. It did help me to understand the love of God more, that
Mhm.
no matter what, how he loves us. But it also gave me,
Mhm.
if I was lacking motivation up to then, I'm not for sure, but if I was, it gave me the motivation. I will not quit. I will not back down.
Wow.
I will not exit this life with bitter spirit just because of my past, because of Chase. I am not doing it. I'm doing whatever I got to do to secure. I know he has to make up his own mind, but
Mhm.
I'm just not giving him any reason with my lifestyle to think he won't make up his mind in the right way. So
Right.
that's what
Exactly.
that's what changed for me with Chase.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that old saying that when you become a parent, a mom, especially, I think the saying is actually it specifies mom. When you become a mom, you forever wear your heart outside your body, forever. So that's true. I became a changed person the day I became a mom too. I think that if you have anything in you at all that understands the war that children fight just to survive in this world, you realize I have to go as far as I can go to give them even just a fraction
A
of a
fraction.
chance of what I've got. So yeah, I totally agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree. Um let's talk about this. There are people listening, I'm sure, who have experienced trauma and grief. And regardless of what it is, whether it's the fact that they cannot have a child, or they've lost a child, or they've lost a parent, or and a sister, sibling, or the other all the other experiences that you had experienced even before we got to that point, which is another podcast for another day, probably, or whatever. But whatever someone has experienced, there are people probably that feel like, you know what, this is too much. I just can't recover. And even though they go through the motions, they actually just become a shell of who they are because they think that it's just impossible. The pain is too great. What would you say to them?
Again, it sounds like a cliche, and I do not mean a church cliche, but to anybody, I would tell the people who go to church, who don't go to church, who believe in God or don't believe in God, they have got to find that God really is love,
Hmm.
and only
Yeah.
God can really change any of that. And he will change it through people in our lives. He can change it through good counseling. He can change it through the body of Christ, such as the local church,
Hmm.
through the power of his word. God's not limited on how he can work.
Hmm.
And for me, that's, I think, what I would tell anyone. This past week, it seems like everywhere I'm reading in the last 2 weeks has been like through Isaiah, but it's just been in Psalms, different places. But he keeps saying that before we were in the womb, he knew us.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I don't know that I would have, I don't believe, I'm pretty positive, I don't believe that 20 years ago when I got to Alexandria, coming there because of having so much sexual abuse in the past. So I get to Alexandria, and then all the stuff we have talked about since I've been on here. I don't believe that maybe 15 and 20 years ago that scripture was so in my brain, or that I felt such peace then about, oh, God knows where I'm at. And it was not a walk in the park then. Again, we give glory to it 20 years later. So,
Hmm.
but then
Right.
I don't believe that's what I was probably thinking. I really do believe I was being carried by my pastors. Every time you had us over, you didn't see anything you were doing. I probably didn't recognize it, but somewhere your family was just carrying us. Going into church, people were just carrying us. I think God carried me through a multitude of vehicles for quite some time. But now, 20 years down the road, free from abuse, I still grieve the loss of my mother and my sister, but you cry a little bit less. But the good memories are there. I have this child. I'm not barren anymore because I do have one son that I pray gives me 4 or 5 grandkids. But uh, the the thing that is really where I'm at right now, if is that God knew me in my mom's womb before the foundations, while I was being formed, before I was placed. There's so many scriptures about being in the womb and how He knew us, and He saw all that. He saw the end from the beginning. And the comfort that I have today is that, wow, God really has brought me through. God really does know where I'm at. It gives me comfort and strength for any future, whatever I might have to face. But what I would tell someone right now who's ever listening, they need to call you for sure. And I'm not just saying that they need to call you because you're the host of this podcast, but they need to call you and let you just begin to help them see that there is really a God that loves us. And there
Yes.
really is a God that moves through people as His vehicles, the hands and feet. And the other thing I think that has helped me is my friend Joanne told me one of the things she told me during all the first trauma before losing my mom,
Hmm.
with all that other stuff that I'd gone through that you know of. She told me
Yeah.
not to throw the good out with the bad. And
Yeah.
I think that that really has helped me later in life. But, I tell a lot of people, if you were hurt by a church and you think you can't go to church because the church hurt you, that was the church. It was not Jesus Christ. If you
Right.
think that you can never love again because you've been wounded from being loved, again, that's humanity that has failed. It's never been God. And so I would tell someone, seek out somebody that knows about God in a great way, get some help, find themselves to be a part of a place that will love them, not judge them. That's what I had. POA didn't judge me. They just let me come in a mess. And then when I had another mess, they loved me through that. People do a lot more for us than we realize, and they don't need to fix it because they can't. But just allowing people in to love. Pastor Anthony did say this, that when you love great, you will hurt great, you will grieve great. And so I did get to love my mom very much, and I've had to feel as much pain in her absence. And that doesn't change the grief, but the comfort of feeling God's peace. That is what I recognize more. I recognize that there is comfort. I recognize now, looking back 20 years, somebody's in the middle of abuse right now, or in the middle of barrenness, infertility, a marriage problem, grief with a loss of things, people, jobs, any loss, and they don't feel like they can see up right now. I'm going to repeat it. They need to reach out to you because you could be the vehicle. And then they need to allow God to start leading them. And I'm not just trying to keep just throwing a churchy cliche. I just know Jesus Christ is the only hope for the world today. He's the only hope. And He really does do wonderful, mysterious things that might not make sense at the time, or we might not understand, but He really does. He loves me more than I ever realized. And I'm realizing that 20 years later. I'm realizing how much He loved me 20 years ago, when I thought I was just a pity case for you and Pastor Terry, mortified and embarrassed by all of the baggage I brought to the table. But I'm realizing what love that was, that God would give that to me, because, the devil thought he had me, but he didn't.
He
And
didn't.
it isn't for my glory. It was really God. God just really, He showed me that love, and I didn't know it. So, as you grow older and grow up a little bit, you start seeing and appreciating more. but I don't know that I really have the right vocabulary or the educated answers. I just know I'm a testimony that if I can come through it, anybody can. I did experience, and I don't think I have the worst story. I just know I did experience a little bit of things. So I've had an experience of some major issues, and I'm still standing, and I'm in my right mind.
You
I
are.
remember counseling, not Dr. Brian, but I remember when we had to do the other stuff, and I remember one psychiatrist just looking at me, not thinking I was going to make it, and I think about that. Like somebody
Mhm.
spoke that over me. But again, the power of what God says and the power of God's people spoke something different. And so, because I listened to that and I took instruction and I was accountable, I don't have any praise for myself. I just can't stress it enough that anyone, anywhere, going through anything, there's a way out. And Jesus is the answer for that.
Sorry.
That's okay. You were there, you were there.
Wow. That was beautiful. That was just beautiful and so true. And that is why I wanted you on here, because that is so powerful. Except a grain of corn fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. And you are such a prime example of something that has to die in order to produce. But oh my goodness, you are producing. You are so producing. Um, I don't think we could even add anymore. I think that's about all we can do. I don't think you can get any more powerful than you were just then. Um, you say that if people want to know more, want to know about God or whatever, they can contact me. That's great. But I would like for, if they need you, they can ask for Angi Manning. And I
And
will,
I'll
I
say, go
will,
see Pastor Terry and Sister Melanie.
I will send them your way, because I don't know that I can do it like you can do it. Seriously though, is there anywhere anybody can find you, like website, social media, anything? And if not, that's fine too. But
I get on Facebook some, so it's just Angela Manning.
okay.
And I think on Instagram it might be Angie Angi Manning Manning. So I do get on those sometimes. So
Okay. All right. Well, as always, it's been an incredible joy to see you, to hear you, to talk to you. And thanks a million. I don't think any more words are possible.